Okay, so welcome everyone to our One Meditation Day interview here with one of our own guest teachers, Jeff Carreira. Jeff has been a guest teacher on our monthly One Meditation Day events several times. And Jeff has been one of the main influences of all of us on the One Meditation team. And so we wanted to give Jeff an opportunity to share a little bit about his own background, about his own personal journey, how it is that he got into spirituality, how he formed his own unique path uh, on spirit in the spiritual world, how he became a teacher, just really share a bit about his own experiences. And Jeff has, as I said, he's been one of our main influences. Jeff, you've been I was just reading your website, and you have such a varied experience. You've been a spiritual teacher, a meditation teacher. You're also a prolific author, writer of nonfiction books, and now you've even taken up writing novels, fictional works, as well as a painter and and leading meditation retreats. Just sort of wondering how all that came about for you, how it first happened, that you first got on the spiritual path, and if you could just share a little bit about your own experience for our audience, that would be really great.
Sure, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself a little bit to the One Meditation audience. Uh, I was always a spiritual seeker. I had spiritual experiences from a very young age, and so growing up in high school, there was always a part of me that didn't understand what the world was about, didn't understand why I was being told to do the things I was doing. And none of it really seemed to make that much sense to me. Uh, and and yet religion didn't either. So when I went to college, I studied physics initially, and I became a devout atheist. Uh, and I was certain that physics would answer all my questions. And then I realized that physics actually doesn't answer all your questions. Uh, and when you get to things like string theory and quantum physics, there's their stories like anything else is a story, and how much they relate to anything real is anybody's guess. Uh, and so at that point, I got interested in the understanding of the mind, and I studied cognitive psychology and eventually education, and that led me to the practice of meditation in a Buddhist context. Initially, I was studying in the Vipassana community in and around Cambridge, Massachusetts. So at that time, uh, yeah, there were a number of teachers at the Cambridge uh, Insight Meditation Center. Larry Rosenberg was one of them, among others. And then I met a spiritual community. I met a spiritual teacher. I got involved, very involved, with a teacher named Andrew Cohen and the community around him. I was part of that community for 20 years. I left my job as an engineer and devoted myself completely to the study of meditation and the pursuit of awakening. That community fell apart about 8 years ago. And after I'd been there for 20 years, and that's when I really, now I had been teaching
Mhm.
for about, 10 years within the community. So I was a very prominent member of the community. I was running our education programs. I was teaching myself all over the world within that context. And so it was natural for me when that community ended to continue to teach. I had a lot of people already that were working with me, and they certainly didn't want that to end. Uh, and so that's when I started building all the things that I'm doing today. And then I wrote the first book I wrote was in, I think, 2012, which was a meditation book, and I've written, I think, 26 since, um, of various lengths, shorter ones and longer ones. But with the writing, what I want to do is there's a whole, essentially a school of thought that I've studied for years, and I've been very interested in both Eastern and Western philosophy, and how those, where those ideas merge and how they complement each other. Uh, and so that's what my books are about. I want to do everything I can to outline the whole world of
Mhm.
spiritual ideas that I've been influenced by. Uh, and of course, the heart and soul of my own teaching work remains the tradition I was working in that community, which is the Hindu tradition of Advaita Vedanta, in the lineage of Ramana Maharshi, a great Indian saint of the early 20th century. And the essence of Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dual tradition of Vedantism, is that free and liberated is what you already are. And therefore, anything that you're doing to try to become free and liberated is exactly the thing that's keeping you from recognizing that you already are. So it's a path of non-doing. It's a path of total surrender to the truth of who you are. And that flavor uh, influences the way that I teach meditation. It influences all the various philosophies that I'm interested in. Uh, that so what has captivated me most is the idea of non-duality, the idea that there's only one, that uh, that the world of multiplicity and division, although it's real at certain levels of being, uh, it's ultimately all connected in some overarching unity and wholeness. Uh, and so, anyway, that's a short synopsis of where I've
Yeah.
been and who I am.
Yeah, that's quite a journey you've been on for sure. And that message of free is what you already are is one that really resonates with me and with our own one meditation community, because that's essentially where we come from as well, the non-dual perspective. I mean, obviously, we've been influenced by your teachings, as well as another teacher who is a good friend of yours, Craig Hamilton, and you've been sort of primary influences in that vision that we've had for our group as well.
Mm.
Um, it's very fascinating that you talk about, this piece around non-duality and non-separation, and yet one of the things I'm really fascinated about by your own journey is just how unique your journey has been, and how you've somehow been able to incorporate a kind of authentic expression of your own journey. And I just wonder if you could say a little bit more about that piece.
Mhm. Well, I guess everyone is unique, right? We're all a unique manifestation. Even if we are all ultimately sourced by the divine, we all are a unique expression of that. And my personality is such, right? Because the inspiration, the spiritual inspiration, is always delivered to the manifest realm of earth through a personality. And different personalities manifest differently. My personality has always been productive and creative. Uh,
Mm.
and so, what happens when someone becomes spiritually inspired, their personality doesn't disappear. It becomes unleashed. They become liberated to be more of who they are. They don't become less of who they are. And so, uh, as I have been more and more spiritually inspired, more and more energized by a deeper source, I find myself being more and more productive, more and more creative in different ways, and kind of ceaselessly, as I have been my whole life, ceaselessly curious about new things. And that becomes part of how my particular manifestation of spirit looks. That's not everybody's particular manifestation of spirit. It's not a superior manifestation. I mean, someone else may have a manifestation of spirit like Ramana Maharshi, who that at least for a number of years compelled him to sit in silence and say nothing. Uh, you know, there can be all kinds of different manifestations of spirit, and none is necessarily superior. I like, one of my favorite, speaking of the East-West cross, one of my favorite writers and spiritual mentors is the Christian monk Thomas Merton. And the thing that I most appreciated about Merton's writing was his kind of relentless call for authenticity of
Yes.
vocation. That he was
Yep.
always saying, you don't want to be a good monk. You don't want to be the best monk. You want to be the monk you're supposed to be, the one that you were destined to be, not the one that you think is the best or that other people are telling you is the best. And I really have taken that to heart, that I follow my own path of inspiration, and it looks like me and nobody else. And it's not necessarily the best, but it's the best for me.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate, your sort of commitment to an authentic expression of, your own spiritual life, your own spiritual unfolding. And certainly that's a message that has resonated with me as well. It's like, really, how do I become, the most authentic person I can be? And I really love how you put that about, this. It's not that your personality is somehow wiped away. It's right. It's unleashed. All your capacities, on your own sort of native capacities, are expressed, but they're expressed in a deeper, richer way. And that's certainly what I've found as I've matured in my own spiritual understanding. So I'm really appreciating that. So just wondering, Jeff, sort of what are you working on right now? What sort of projects are you working on? I know I saw that you recently come out with a new book, and so just wondering if you could say a little bit about that.
Well, sure. I mean, this is, I would say I'm in the middle of a big project, which is
Mm.
the end of last year. I really got inspired. I was very, very inspired uh, to write and to share a lot of ideas in books. And so I made a commitment to myself to publish one book a month for 3 years. Uh, and so now we are in August. So I published 8 books this year. I have 2 more that are already ready, and 2 that I need to write before the end of the year to make 12 for this year. And I've got a plan to do, and I'm doing that. A lot of them are shorter books, but I really felt compelled to want to share in book form ultimately everything that's inspired me. I don't know how long that will take, but so I'm in the middle of that, and right at the moment, I'm writing a book that I'm very excited about. That's called "Spiritual Experience and Cosmic Awareness," and essentially, that book. Uh, in that book, I am looking at some of the most transformative spiritual experiences that I've had, uh, and what I want to use the book to speak about is the fact that we have spiritual experiences, and obviously they're important to have, but we don't just have them. We also interpret them. We make
Mm.
meaning out of them. And
Yeah.
how we make meaning out of them is as important as having them in the first place. Uh, because 2 people can have exactly the same experience. One interprets that experience in a way that leads to a huge leap in their spiritual development. Another translates that experience in a way that leads to nothing,
Hmm.
that leads to the experience being dismissed or forgotten. Uh, And so I want to write the book about uh, some of the experiences that I've had, uh, how I have interpreted them and why I interpret them that way, other possible ways that they could be interpreted, and how you might want to think about interpreting your own spiritual experiences and why. And and ultimately, the vision that I want to share with that book is uh, the way the path has worked for me. And this is, I have a unique path, just like we all do. So my unique path involved 20 years of intensive work in a spiritual community where I had the opportunity to do enormous amounts of practice all the time and have numerous, countless spiritual experiences, some of which were, earth shattering. And so what happens on the path is you're chugging along on the spiritual path, and then there's a huge opening of some type, some form or another. And then you make meaning out of that. You make that mean something or not. And how you make meaning of it determines what possibilities start to open for you for the future. Right. And so then the next time, so that opens up a whole new range of experiences. And then you have one there. And then that opens up a new possibility. And so the way you interpret your experience is, whether you're conscious of it or not, is guiding your path. So for instance, I use this example in the book, but I had a powerful experience of constant awareness, constant consciousness, where for 3 days I couldn't lose consciousness. So when I fell asleep, I was still there. I just watched my body fall asleep. I watched my mind fall asleep. I just abided in emptiness all night. Then I watched my mind wake up and I watched my body wake up. I concluded from 3 nights of that experience, that I am a kind of free-floating source of awareness from another dimension that has become embedded in the idea of a self associated with this body. But that when this body, before this body was born, I was just a source of awareness. And then the body appeared, and somehow I ended up in it. I ended up getting myself all identified with it. When the body drops, the source of awareness will continue. I don't know. That's what I will be. I concluded that made the most sense to me in terms of the experience that I had. It instantaneously kind of eradicated a certain existential fear of death, because it was obvious to me that I was never born and I will never die. And it set the stage for a whole series of experiences that happened later that kept confirming that and taking it further, right? Now I say in the book, what if I had concluded that actually I was having a psychotic break and I had become dislodged, I had become disassociated from my mind? What potentials would that have opened up? Maybe I would have gone to see a doctor. Maybe they would have diagnosed me with a mental illness. Maybe I would have started taking medications. You see how you interpret the experience. Does that mean I was right in my interpretation? Not necessarily. I mean, someone could argue that it actually was a psychotic break and I somehow turned it into a spiritual experience, but that's not how it feels to me. And that's not how my life is unfolding at this point.
What do you look at it as, that you're unfolding life as it has unfolded, as confirmation of the the truth of
No,
the meaning?
I know. I think the way it works is, how, it's more complicated than that. It's not just that it confirms the truth of what always was. If I conclude that I've had a psychotic break, sorry, did you hear that?
No,
Okay, good.
didn't hear anything.
Okay, good. If I conclude that if I concluded that I was having a psychotic break, that would open up a field of choice that I would then make. As I went in that direction, I would inevitably get confirmation that that's what had happened. I would essentially be living into that reality. Now, maybe I'd be living into a reality where I was eventually cured of the problem, or where it was seen as a temporary situation, or maybe it would be something I would then be living with my whole life. But I go, the direction you go in is where you get confirmation. I went in this direction, that I am an unlimited absolute source of awareness from a different dimension, temporarily inhabiting a body. And that opened up experiences and choices that kept confirming that, until more and more and more, that's the reality I live in. Now, both of those realities are real realities for the person living them. How they relate to some other overarching reality that is somehow more real than the I have no idea. I'm not sure there is such a thing. I don't know if there is a reality beyond the reality that we experience.
Yeah, that's definitely a little more nuanced and complicated and complex
Yes.
expression for sure. But it does make sense, very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense to me. And that's in that sense that I can understand comments like, we create our own reality, right? Not in the
Yeah,
magical sense that I think something and then it happens,
yeah,
but
yeah, for sure.
because of the way I interpret my reality, that then influences the choices I make. The choices I make then influence the feedback I get, which influences the next round of, and it goes on and on and on. And we do create our own reality that way.
Yeah, I do. I would agree with that for sure. And I've sort of found confirmation of that in my own life. At one point, I know, I was stuck in a mindset where I saw myself as broken and fragile. And that continued to manifest itself. And I continued to show up in a way that demonstrated that.
Mm,
And then at one point, I was doing my practice and I had some of my own sort of spiritual experiences and sort of transformative breakthroughs. And at a certain point, I just was like, I don't, that story doesn't serve me anymore.
right.
I don't,
Right.
I'm going to pick a different story, one based on these experiences, and I'm going to allow that story to unfold in that way. And it's been a whole different way of seeing the world. One that went from this kind of cynical person who was pessimistic, who didn't believe they could do anything, to suddenly being someone who, uh, could unleash kind of the creative potential
Mm,
that I had.
mm,
So yeah, I've kind of seen demonstration of that principle in my own life to a certain degree.
fantastic.
Definitely. And just curious, you've got this massive writing project, it sounds like, going on. I'm sort of wondering, and you've been focusing on nonfiction, and now you've kind of switched to fiction. I'm wondering how the fiction supports the nonfiction and the nonfiction supports the fiction, and why sort of that turn for you?
Well, I started writing fiction a couple of years ago, actually, slowly, and I've written 4 novels to date. And I'll tell you why I came to that conclusion. Uh, there were 2 reasons. Initially, it was because I was reading a philosopher, an American philosopher who's no longer alive, but a late 20th century philosopher named Richard Rorty.
Hmm.
And Richard Rorty was an American pragmatist and one of the most prominent philosophers of the late 20th century, certainly American philosophers. And he came to the conclusion later in his life that uh, the idea that philosophical ideas are telling you about reality is not a useful way to look at it. Uh, he said philosophy should really be thought about uh, as one of the humanities, as a form of literature. And what philosophy does is it creates a compelling way to understand the world. And if it's compelling enough, everybody will join into that conversation, right? And when everybody's in that conversation, then we are collectively creating a world around that conversation. And he would even say that modern science is really a philosophy. Uh, and it's the philosophy that, by and large in the Western world, everybody's in that conversation. And because everybody's in that conversation, it's assumed to be reality. But it
I would
really,
definitely agree with that, by the way. That you,
yeah, well, so would I. So you can see
yeah,
why I was into it.
sure.
Um, and so he thought that it would be better for us to think about philosophy because it liberates you. Because if you're thinking about philosophy as something that's describing a reality, uh, then there's certain ways you go about philosophy. But if you're thinking about philosophy as compelling literature about reality, uh, a compelling way to understand reality, it frees you in the way that you think. So at the end of his career, he said actually he felt writing literature would be more valuable than writing philosophy. Uh, for two reasons. One, people actually read literature and hardly anybody reads philosophy. But two, uh, generally speaking, it's in literature, in stories, that stories contain an emotional impact. And the emotional impact is crucial for establishing the conversation. And it's difficult to write philosophical texts that have the same emotional impact. Uh, and so when that a light bulb went off, and I thought, "Ooh, I wonder if I could write novels that would share the philosophy I want to share, but do it better with more emotion than what I can get in a nonfiction book." So that was one. Two, sometime later, I realized that there were all kinds of things that I believe that are my reality, but that I'm very shy to talk about because they seem so outlandish. I'm afraid people will think I'm nuts. So I thought, oh, I could put those in novels. I could I could give those perspectives in novels, and I could attribute them to the characters in the novel without actually having to take responsibility for them. Uh, and so that's part of what I've done in my novels is I share some of the more outlandish ways that I experience reality and see reality, but I do it with the anonymity that comes from a novel. And you asked me, how is that impacting my nonfiction? It's impacting it because now in the latest piece of nonfiction that I just described to you, I'm realizing I'm starting to describe those things that I was only describing in novels last year. But now that I've written them in novels a few times, I'm feeling a little more confident to sort of claim them as my own actual experience. And so I've just been thrilled at how the novels and my fiction and nonfiction have been speaking to each other as I've been writing them.
Well, that's great to hear, and certainly I'm a fan of fiction and in art as well. I find that it, has a kind of transformative capacity. Like you said, that emotional element, that emotional connection that can somehow transport us
Mm.
beyond, our sort of established or understood frames of reality. And it can take us beyond that, far beyond it, in my experience, certainly.
Mm.
And I, I look to at some point write my own fictional works. I believe I have that capacity. I think that that's going to happen someday,
Hmm.
but not right now because I have other interests to focus on. But yeah, definitely. And to hear that, it has that sort of liberating effect on your own nonfiction. Wow, that's really wonderful to hear, Jeff.
Yeah, it's exciting. Very
Yeah, for
exciting.
sure. And I know also, you've talked a lot about your writing, but I'm wondering also about, because you're a meditation teacher as
Yes.
well, awakening teacher, actually, if we want to be
Mm,
more technical about it. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about that aspect as well.
absolutely. Because obviously that's very an important aspect for one meditation. So it's good we're coming around to that. Uh, and we started this a little bit. To me, meditation, the purpose of meditation is to disembed yourself from false identification with the separate sense of self. So the separate sense of self is the history of this body, the ideas around who Jeff is and what Jeff's capable of and what Jeff's history has been and what Jeff's aspirations are, and all of that, which is all real and all good. Nothing's wrong with it. But the awareness that's aware of this body and that's aware of all the ideas about Jeff, and that has all those aspirations is more than that. It is coming from a source beyond this body and beyond this lifetime. And I feel like in order for us, if we want to, well, the point of meditation is to liberate yourself from false identification with the separate sense of self. I believe, and it now has become my reality, that when one does that, you will discover that you are an infinite source of awareness that's been traveling through lifetimes. Uh, and there's a very interesting piece of this which I don't speak that much about, but we are beyond the personality. We are also a soul that has moved from lifetime to lifetime and is on a much longer journey than just Jeff's journey. And then beyond the soul, where there's the oneness, which is the awareness that's animating all the souls and animating all of the incarnate souls in whatever physical form they happen to be in. So of course, there's the thrill of discovering who you really are, which that's enough. Clearly that's enough that's worth the price of admission right there. And as we talked about earlier, it's also how you liberate the personality in this life. So you discover who you are in some much, inexplicably grand sense, while at the same time you liberate this. The liberation, when you liberate the source of awareness from the false identification with the separate self, you're also liberating the separate self to be more unleashed in its expression, right?
Yeah.
It becomes free as well, which is why one of the marks that you tend to notice in people who you feel are spiritually awake is that they are very authentically themselves. They're not afraid to be themselves anymore, and they express themselves powerfully and uniquely in whatever way they do. So yeah, for me, I teach meditation, but really I'm teaching this kind of spiritual liberation that I'm talking about. Meditation just happens to be a practice that was incredibly valuable to me. And I don't know, that's a contingency. Who knows? If I had found myself in a Christian community, maybe I'd be teaching prayer today. But I found myself in a Hindu-based meditation community, so I'm teaching meditation. So first of all, meditation was the main vehicle of my awakening, or certainly one of the main vehicles of my own path. Secondly, meditation is something you can teach. It's more difficult to teach spiritual liberation because it's too amorphous.
Yes.
Meditation gives you something you can get your hands on. Now, when people come and learn meditation from me, I'm going to try and hand them the wheel and take it away as fast as I can. but still, you at least get the wheel to start with. You get something to go, okay, I'm doing something. And then I'm going to say, no,
Yeah.
no, don't do anything. Drop the wheel, surrender, and give up control. But again, the meditation creates the pathway in. And so that's what that's why I teach it. That's why I love it. And it's unendingly fascinating to me. I've been teaching meditation for about 20 years. And it never ceases to be fascinating to me to teach meditation at all levels. It's fascinating to me to teach people who've been meditating for decades. It's equally fascinating for me to teach someone who's just learning about meditation today, to see how they're going to respond and how they're going to discover the multiple fruits available through that practice.
Yeah, I love hearing you say that because meditation has been, probably the primary tool for transformation in my own life. So I have a great, appreciation for meditation and for teaching meditation. I want to share this with whoever I can come into contact with because it's been such a powerful, transformative tool in my own path. So I definitely appreciate you mentioning that. So, just wondering, sort of, so what do you see, or right now, sort of like, what is the future for Jeff Carreira? What's going to unfold? Any big plans beyond the writing project that you're working on this year?
I mean, yeah, it's let's say what is my plans? Uh, what I see happening, because in addition to the things we've talked about, I also have a membership community of about
Yes, yeah,
400 people, of which you are one. Uh, and a number of people in that community, including yourself, are emerging more and more as teachers in their own right. Uh, and so definitely one of the future possibilities that I feel for myself is the development of that community, and specifically through the empowerment of those people that are teaching in the community, because I feel like that's the next step, to have
mhm,
more people like yourself who are uh, able to authentically act as guides to others, is what will strengthen the bonds of the whole community. That the model of, because up until now I've been the main teacher, right? So the
yeah,
model of one teacher in the middle, you can kind of just, if you just think about it, if there's one teacher in the middle connected to everybody, it's not a very stable structure. And heaven forbid, as I've lived through, what happens when the one person in the middle falls down? The whole thing falls down. So what I'm envisioning is, what if there's a dozen people and they're not in the middle? They're just sprinkled throughout, and how much more powerful a community that is, because that means, because I don't believe in the one size fits all model of teaching. I don't believe that there's one teacher for everybody. I believe that we all probably have multiple teachers in our path. We have a teacher that's perfect for us
yep,
today.
yep,
We may move on to someone tomorrow who's got the next piece for us, which means as there's more teachers in that community, people can find the teacher that's perfect for them right now. And every teacher's a little every teacher's a little bit different than than the other, even if they're teaching. So you teach meditation, I teach meditation, but I teach differently than you teach, both because of my personality and your personality, but also because my background is one background and your background is another background.
yep,
And some people are going to resonate with me and go, wow, that's exactly, this is perfect for me. And somebody's going to resonate with you and say, this is perfect for me. And if you have 3 people teaching meditation, you can reach more people. And if you have 6 more, and if you have 10 more. So I would say this is a big part of the future, besides the writing books and wanting to create that body of philosophy. besides wanting to continually deepen my own teaching of meditation and awakening, uh, I also want to be training teachers to teach, and I want to be empowering them within that online community to see what can happen. I would love for that online community to grow to a place where I was really just one of the teachers, and that's how it felt to people. Uh, and it's going to take some time to get there, but that to me is worth doing, because then that particular community is no longer dependent on my participation. That there's enough. That's going to be a happy day for me when I know that there's enough people teaching with enough authenticity and authority that the community is self-sustaining without me. Uh, that will be that'll be a real success in my estimation. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about for the future, for sure.
Wow, that's a really grand vision, and one I think that really seems to be more effective, right? Because I've seen as well, right? You have the one teacher who is at the top, and then so everybody is just following the one teacher, and then like if that teacher something happens, right, the community crumbles because it's so dependent on the one person. But if you
Mhm.
have that multiple people, right, and then it's sustaining, and it's also very humble, right?
Mm.
It's like saying that I'm not this. I don't have to be the center of attention, and I'm not the center of attention. So I just really appreciate how, your own humility in being willing to adopt a model like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I, my sense is many teachers can't or won't do that.
Well, I've been blessed by the fact that I'm so obviously flawed that it's hard for me to pretend that I'm the pinnacle of possibility. So, that's worked to my to my benefit in this case, because I'm aware that I know that I'm really, really good at the things I'm really, really good at. Uh, and I know that there are other people that are really, really good at other things, and I'm not good at those things. So
Yeah,
why would I want to pretend that I'm like the one shop stop?
I completely agree with you. Well, Jeff, it's really been great to talk with you today. And thank you so much for being willing to do this, have this conversation with me. It's, we all appreciate your own generosity, right? I think if there's one thing that really resonates with all of us, it's your heart, it's your willingness to serve in this kind of generous fashion. You've been so generous with your time with one meditation. You've been generous with me personally, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, and also want to give you an opportunity to share, your own contact information. How people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your writing, more about your own, your mystery school membership community,
Mhm.
or any of the other many projects that you have going on. If you want to share a bit.
Sure. I mean, just to keep everything very simple, if people go to my website, which is jeffcarreira.com, they can find links to everything else. Uh, there's no, I try to make things as simple as possible. And one thing that I will say, because when does this come out?
Well, we're hoping to get it out before the September 12th, before your appearance on our One Meditation Day event.
Okay, so that's fantastic because on September 12th, so the timing here is working out beautifully. September 12th, I'm going to do my first, it'll be after the one meditation, which I think I'm doing at 10 a.m. But later that day at noon, I'm going to be doing my first Instagram live stream, and I'm going to start doing those every week because I just want to explore that medium for sharing the kind of wisdom of meditation and awakening. So if people want to find me on Instagram, I think it's jeffcarreira.awakening, and follow me there and join me for a Instagram live on the 12th and every week after that, if you are so inclined.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Jeff, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to having you on the September 12th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.